John Kennedy stares across the stage, his voice echoing to the packed CNN studio. "Sit down, girl." The words hang in the air, sharp and unexpected, slicing through the tension like a knife. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez doesn't flinch. Instead, her eyes narrow, her posture straightens, and her response, delivered with calm, unshakable resolve, leaves the entire nation stunned. Within seconds, the internet explodes. Hashtags like #SitDownGirl and #LCVSKennedy trend worldwide. Clips of the moment flood social media, sparking outrage, admiration, and debate in every corner of America. News anchors replay the exchange on a loop, pundits argue over its meaning, and millions of viewers are left asking, did Kennedy go too far? Or did AOC just redefine what it means to stand your ground? Tonight's debate was supposed to be about energy policy. Instead, it became a cultural flashpoint, a battle over respect, leadership, and the future of America. The CNN studio pulsed with anticipation, every seat filled, the air thick with the kind of tension that only comes before a national reckoning. Overhead, rows of spotlights cast a sharp, almost theatrical glow across the polished stage. The audience, a cross-section of America, from students and activists to oil workers and business leaders, sat in hushed expectation, their faces illuminated by the blue-white wash of television lights and the glow of their phones, already buzzing with speculation. Outside, the city's usual nighttime rhythm faded into the background. Inside, time seemed to slow. Two podiums stood at the center of the stage, separated by a modest table and a single, gleaming microphone. The iconic CNN logo glowed behind them, a silent reminder that tonight's debate will be broadcast to millions across the country and around the world. Backstage, producers whispered urgently into headsets, checking camera angles and sound levels, their voices tense but controlled. In the control room, screens flicker with live feeds, trending hashtags, and a countdown clock ticking toward zero. The stakes were clear. This was more than just another policy discussion. It was a collision of ideas, generations, and vision for America's future. The debate topic, America's energy future, had never felt more urgent. With wildfires raging in the West, hurricanes battering the South, and energy prices rising everywhere, the nation was hungry for answers. The question wasn't just about oil, gas, or renewables. It was about jobs, security, and the very direction of the country. As the final seconds ticked away, the audience's chatter faded to a hush. Anderson Cooper, the night's moderator, stepped into the spotlight, his expression serious but composed. He glanced at his notes, then at the two empty chairs soon to be filled by the night's combatants. The air was thick with expectation, a sense that, tonight, something important was about to unfold. The cameras rolled. The nation leaned in. The debate was about to begin. John Kennedy sat at the edge of his seat, every inch of his posture radiating a new kind of purpose. Known for his Southern wit and decades of experience in the Senate, tonight he was something different. The face of a bold, progressive vision. At 74, Kennedy had surprised the nation by championing the Green New Deal, calling for urgent climate action and a complete transformation of America's energy landscape. His gray suit was classic, but his eyes burned with the conviction of a man who believed the future could and must be rewritten. Kennedy's reputation had always been built on connecting with working people, but now he was reaching for something bigger. He spoke of solar fields in Louisiana, wind farms on the Gulf, and a new generation of jobs that would lift communities out of poverty and into prosperity. For some, he was a visionary. For others, a traitor to tradition. But no one could deny that he had become the most unlikely champion of radical change. Across from him, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, projected a different kind of power. At 36, she was no longer the insurgent but the defender of hard-won ground. Her rise from the Bronx to Congress had inspired millions, but tonight she stood for something more pragmatic. The livelihoods of workers, the stability of families, and the industries that had built America's middle class. Her red blazer was a nod to her roots, but her message was clear. Change must not come at the expense of those who could least afford it. AOC's eyes scanned the audience, sharp and unyielding, as if daring anyone to dismiss the real-world consequences of reckless policy. She spoke of refinery workers in New York, truck drivers in the Midwest, and the families who depended on oil and gas to survive. For her supporters, she was a voice of reason and reality. For her critics, a symbol of resistance to progress. Tonight, the contrast between them was impossible to miss. Kennedy, the unexpected revolutionary, and AOC, the seasoned guardian of tradition. Two Americas, face to face, each convinced the other was leading the country down the wrong path. The only certainty, sparks were about to fly. Anderson Cooper stepped into the spotlight, his presence commanding instant silence. The hum of the audience faded as he looked directly into the camera, his voice steady and clear, a familiar anchor in a night brimming with uncertainty. Good evening, America. Tonight, we gather at a crossroads. Our nation faces urgent questions about energy, climate, and the future of work. The choices we make now will echo for generations to come. He turned, gesturing to the two candidates seated at the center of the stage. With us are Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, two leaders with very different visions for America's energy future. The rules were simple, but the stakes were anything but. Each candidate would have 2 minutes to answer the initial question, followed by rebuttals and open discussion. No interruptions, no personal attacks. At least, that was a hope. The audience was asked to hold applause until the end of each segment, though everyone knew that rule would be tested. Cooper's gaze swept the room, then returned to the camera. Let's begin. Senator Kennedy, the first question is yours. The lights brightened. The debate and the nation's attention shifted to Kennedy as the first real test of ideas was about to begin. Anderson Cooper's voice cut through the silence, his tone direct and unflinching. Senator Kennedy, you become the face of a bold new energy vision, one that calls for a rapid transition to renewables, sweeping climate action, and a reimagining of America's economy. But critics say your proposals are too expensive, too disruptive, and risk leaving entire communities behind. How do you respond to those who say your vision is simply unrealistic? Kennedy leaned forward, his hands folded on the table, his gaze unwavering. The room seemed to shrink around him as he began to speak, his words measured but passionate. Anderson, the real question isn't whether we can afford to act. It's whether we can afford not to. Every year, Americans lose their homes, their livelihoods, and sometimes their lives to wildfires, hurricanes, and floods made worse by climate change. The cost of inaction is measured in billions of dollars and broken communities. My plan is about more than just cutting emissions. It's about rebuilding our infrastructure, creating millions of good-paying union jobs, and making sure no one, no worker, no family, no community is left behind. He paused, letting his words settle over the audience. The Green New Deal is a blueprint for the future. It invests in solar, wind, and geothermal energy. It funds retraining programs for workers in fossil fuel industries, so they're not left out of the new economy. And it prioritizes justice, because the communities hit hardest by pollution and climate disasters are too often ignored. A ripple of applause broke out, quickly stifled by the moderator's raised hand. In the audience, some nodded in agreement, while others exchanged skeptical glances. On social media, hashtags like hashtag Green New Deal and hashtag Kennedy 2024 began to trend, the debate already igniting digital firestorms. Kennedy continued, his voice rising with conviction. We have a choice. Lead the world in clean energy or get left behind as other countries take the lead. This isn't just about the environment. It's about jobs, security, and America's place in the world. The Green New Deal is how we win the future. He leaned back, his eyes never leaving AOC, as if daring her to challenge his vision. The first shot had been fired, and the nation was watching to see how the defender of tradition would respond to the call for transformation. AOC listened intently, her expression composed but her eyes sharp. As the applause faded, she leaned forward, her voice steady and clear, a tone honed by years of defending her community and her convictions. Senator Kennedy, I respect your passion, but let's talk about what these big promises mean for real people. In the Bronx, in Queens, and across working-class neighborhoods in America, families depend on jobs and industries you want to phase out overnight. Oil, gas, trucking, manufacturing. These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They're paychecks, health insurance, and the difference between hope and hardship. She paused, letting the reality of her words settle over the room. I've met refinery workers who spend decades building a life for their families. You talk about retraining, but let's be honest, most government programs don't deliver. The transition you're proposing isn't a bridge, it's a cliff. You can't just promise a solar job tomorrow to someone who spent 30 years on a rig or in a plant. What happens to them while we wait for your new economy to arrive? AOC's tone grew more personal, her words resonating with those who felt left behind by sweeping change. I'm not against progress. I'm for people. We need to invest in new technologies, yes, but we also need to protect the workers who built this country. That means a realistic transition, one that doesn't gamble with their futures or treat them as collateral damage in a political experiment. The audience responded with a mix of applause and murmurs, the divide in the room growing sharper. On social media, hashtags like hashtag AOC for Workers and hashtag Real World Reality began to trend, as viewers debated whether Kennedy's vision was inspiring or reckless. She continued, her voice unwavering. Senator, you say the world is moving forward, but if we move too fast, we risk leaving millions behind. We need a plan that's honest about the costs, that doesn't just sound good in a speech, but works for families in the real world. I'm here to fight for them. Not for headlines, not for hashtags, but for the people who can't afford to lose their jobs while politicians argue about the future. AOC leaned back, her gaze steady, her message clear. Vision was important, but so was reality. The room felt the shift, a reminder that every bold idea comes with a price, and someone always pays it. The tension in the studio was now unmistakable, the ideological lines drawn deeper with every exchange. Kennedy, undeterred by AOC's reality check, leaned forward, his voice gaining urgency. Congresswoman, I hear your concerns, but the truth is, we don't have the luxury of time. Every year we delay, the cost of climate disasters grows. Lives lost, homes destroyed, billions spent on recovery instead of prevention. The Green New Deal isn't just a dream. It's a necessity. We're talking about investing in solar, wind, and geothermal, yes, but also about creating a new generation of jobs. Retraining isn't a handout. It's a lifeline. We can't let fear of change keep us chained to the past. He paused, his gaze sweeping the audience, searching for understanding. I've met young people in Louisiana who want to stay, who want to build their futures at home, but can't because the only jobs left are in dying industries. We owe them more than nostalgia. We owe them a future. AOC's response was swift, her tone sharpened by conviction. Senator, you talk about the future, but you're asking millions of families to risk everything on a promise. Retraining sounds good, but the reality is most of these programs don't deliver. Less than half of workers who enter them find stable, comparable jobs. And what about the years in between? The bills don't stop coming just because Washington says, trust us. She leaned in, her words cutting through the applause and murmurs. I'm not against renewables. I'm for a balanced approach. We need to invest in clean energy, but we can't abandon the industries that keep our lights on and our people working. The world isn't going to stop using oil and gas tomorrow, and pretending otherwise is dangerous. We need a bridge, not a leap into the unknown. Kennedy's eyes flashed, his voice rising with passion. Congresswoman, the real danger is doing nothing. The science is clear. We're running out of time. If we don't act now, we're not just failing this generation. We're failing every generation after. The Green New Deal is about survival, not just ambition. The audience was split, some clapping for Kennedy's urgency, others for AOC's caution. On social media, the debate was trending, with users taking sides, memes flying, and hashtags like hashtag FutureNow and hashtag ProtectOurJobs lighting up timelines. The clash was no longer just about policy. It was about values, vision, and the very soul of the country. The audience leaned in, sensing that the real fireworks were just beginning. Anderson Cooper, sensing the rising temperature in the room, raised his hand to pause the escalating back and forth. His voice softened, shifting the focus from policy to people. Senator Kennedy, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, there's been growing criticism that these energy debates often ignore the human cost. Whether it's job losses in fossil fuel regions or the impact of climate disasters on vulnerable communities, Real Americans are caught in the middle. How do you ensure your policies reflect the real needs of those most affected? Kennedy seized a moment, his tone turning earnest. Anderson, this is exactly why we need a new approach. Climate change hits hardest in communities that have been ignored for too long. Low-income families, communities of color, rural areas. My plan prioritizes them, with funding for clean energy projects in places like Lake Charles, not just Silicon Valley. We're talking about justice, not just jobs. We can't leave anyone behind. His words drew cheers from younger audience members, his message resonating with those who saw him as a champion for equity and the forgotten. AOC, however, tilted her head, her expression steady but pointed. Justice is a fine word, Senator, but I'm not sure it pays the bills for a single mom in the Bronx who's worried about her next paycheck. You can't eat justice. You can't heat your home with it. We need solutions that don't just sound good, but work for folks who don't have the luxury of waiting for your utopia. The crowd murmured, the divide in the room deepening as the debate shifted from numbers to the faces behind them. The human cost was no longer an abstract talking point. It was the heart of the debate. The air in the studio was thick with tension, every word now carrying the weight of a nation divided. Kennedy's jaw tightened, his patience visibly thinning as AOC's words echoed in the silence. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on AOC, his voice sharp but controlled. Congresswoman, I'm not talking about utopia. I'm talking about survival. The science is clear. We're running out of time. If we don't invest in clean energy now, we're not just failing that single mom in the Bronx. We're failing her kids, her grandkids, and every generation after. This isn't about waiting. It's about acting. The audience erupted in applause, but the undercurrent of tension was unmistakable. AOC's smile faded slightly, but she held her ground, her voice calm yet firm. Senator, I don't disagree that we need to act, but action that bankrupts communities in the name of progress isn't action. It's ideology. Folks in my district don't need lectures on survival. They're living it every day. The crowd responded with a mix of claps and murmurs, the divide in the room becoming palpable. Both candidates were playing to their bases, but the stakes were climbing higher with every exchange. Then came the moment that would change everything. Kennedy, perhaps sensing an opportunity to seize control, leaned in even closer, his eyes blazing. Congresswoman, let's be real, your approach is stuck in the past, defending industries that are dying while the world moves forward. Maybe it's time for some folks to step aside and let a new generation lead. A hush fell over the studio. AOC raised an eyebrow, her expression still composed but with a flicker of annoyance. Or was it amusement? Before she could respond, Kennedy pressed further, his voice slicing to the tension like a blade. "Sit down, girl," he said, his tone dripping with condescension, a smirk playing at the edge of his lips. The words landed like a thunderclap. The studio fell silent, the kind of silence that feels like the world holding its breath. Anderson Cooper froze, his pen hovering over his notes. The audience sat stunned, some clutching their programs, others exchanging wide-eyed glances. In the control room, producers scrambled, their headsets buzzing with frantic chatter. On social media, the moment exploded. Hashtags like hashtag #SitDownGirl and hashtag Kennedy vs. OC began trending within seconds as viewers across the country reacted in real time. Some called it a bold power move, others a reckless misstep. But everyone agreed this was no longer just a debate. This was a cultural moment. The silence in the studio was electric, the weight of Kennedy's words hanging in the air. All eyes were on AOC. She didn't flinch, didn't look away. Instead, she straightened her posture, her expression calm but resolute, her voice steady as she leaned into the microphone. "Senator Kennedy, I've been called a lot of things in my life, but I have to say, that's a new one. I suppose when you run out of arguments, you resort to telling people to sit down instead of standing up for what's right." A ripple of nervous laughter broke the tension, but AOC's gaze never left Kennedy's. She continued, her tone unwavering but dignified. "You want to talk about leadership? Let's do it. Leadership isn't about who can throw the sharpest insult or who can silence the other side. It's about listening to people, even those you disagree with, It's about understanding that the policies we debate here don't just make headlines. They shape lives, families, and futures. She paused, letting her words settle over the audience, her voice growing stronger with each sentence. You can call me girl and tell me to sit down, but I'm not here to play games. I'm here to fight for the people who don't have a seat at this table, for the workers who are worried about their next paycheck, for the families who can't afford to wait for promises that never come, for the communities that have been left behind by both parties for too long. The audience erupted, a mix of applause and cheers, some for AOC's restraint, others for her directness. Kennedy shifted in his seat, his earlier confidence now met with a new kind of respect from the crowd. AOC continued, her voice now carrying the room. Senator, you want to talk about the future? Fine. But the future isn't built by telling people to sit down and be quiet. It's built by standing up, speaking out, and making sure every American, no matter where they come from or what they look like, has a voice in what comes next. The cameras panned across the studio, capturing the reactions. A young woman in the front row clapping for AOC, an older man nodding solemnly at her words. On social media, the debate was already spiraling into a cultural moment, with memes of Kennedy's quip and AOC's calm response flooding feeds. Commentators were split, but one thing was clear. The debate had transcended policy. It was now about respect, power, and the fault lines running through a divided America. Anderson Cooper, sensing the need to bring the debate back to substance, cleared his throat and leaned into his microphone. Let's return to the topic of energy policy. Senator Kennedy, you've outlined a bold vision for America's energy future. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, you've raised concerns about the real-world impact on working families. Let's talk specifics. How do your plans address the immediate needs of Americans while preparing for future? Kennedy, regaining his composure, nodded. Thank you, Anderson. The Green New Deal isn't just a slogan. It's a roadmap. We're talking about investing trillions in infrastructure, clean energy, and job training. Yes, it's ambitious, but so is building the interstate highway system or going to the moon. We can't let fear of change keep us from leading the world. And for every job loss in fossil fuels, we'll create 2 in renewables, manufacturing, and technology. That's not just hope. It's a plan backed by data and global trends. He gestured toward AOC. But I understand anxiety. That's why my plan includes direct support for workers, wage guarantees, retraining, and community investment. We can't leave anyone behind. AOC responded, her tone measured but firm. Senator, ambition is important, but so is honesty. The numbers don't add up for a lot of families. You say every job loss will be replaced, but history shows transitions are messy. In New York, we've seen factories close and promises of retraining fall short. People can't pay their bills with hope. We need to make sure the bridge to the future is real, not just a talking point. She continued, my plan invests in both, supporting existing industries while gradually expanding renewables. We need to protect what we have as we build what's next. That's how you keep the lights on and food on the table. The audience responded with a mix of applause and murmurs. The debate now a tug-of-war between Kennedy's sweeping vision and AOC's grounded pragmatism. The nation watched, knowing that the answer would shape not just policy, but the lives of millions. The studio was now a crucible of ideas, every word and gesture magnified by the tension in the air. Anderson Cooper, sensing the moment, offered one last, open-ended question. Both of you have outlined your energy policies, but how do you address criticism that they overlook the immediate needs of working-class Americans? Senator Kennedy, you first. Kennedy took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the audience before locking on Cooper. Anderson, this is why the Green New Deal is so important. It's not just about climate. It's about people. Working-class families in places like Lake Charles, Louisiana, or Detroit, Michigan, are already feeling the pain of pollution, rising energy costs, and jobs that are disappearing. My plan invests in those communities, creating good-paying union jobs in clean energy, building solar farms, retrofitting schools, weatherizing homes. We're not just talking about the future. We're building it, right now, for the people who need it most. His words drew applause, especially from younger audience members. But he wasn't done. Turning to AOC, his tone sharpened. Congresswoman, your approach defends an industry that's poisoning those same communities. Oil and gas profits go to CEOs, not workers. How can you claim to fight for the working class when your policies chain them to a dying industry? The crowd erupted, some cheering Kennedy's boldness, others shifting uncomfortably at his pointed attack. Social media amplified the moment. Clips captioned Kennedy calls out Big Oil, spreading rapidly. AOC's expression tightened, her calm facade showing a faint crack. She leaned forward, her voice steady but intense. Senator, I don't defend industries. I defend people. That includes the thousands of New Yorkers whose jobs depend on oil, gas, and manufacturing. You talk about dignity, and I agree, nothing's more dignified than a paycheck earned with your own hands. But your plan promises jobs that don't exist yet, while eliminating the ones folks rely on today. That's not justice. That's gambling with people's lives. The audience clapped. AOC's story grounding the debate in human terms. The final exchange had become a battle of stories, values, and the very definition of progress. As the final echoes of applause faded, the tension in the studio softened, replaced by a quiet sense of exhaustion and reflection. Anderson Cooper, recognizing the emotional toll of the night, offered both candidates a chance for closing thoughts. Kennedy, his earlier fire now tempered by the gravity of the moment, spoke first. Tonight shows how much people care about our future, about jobs, environment, and fairness. My vision is for a country where no one is left behind, where we tackle climate change while creating opportunities for all, not just the powerful. I hear workers' concerns, and I commit to including them through training and investment. We can't let fear stop us from doing what's right. His words drew sincere applause, less thunderous but more unified, as the audience grappled with the complexity of the issues. AOC leaned forward, her tone warm yet firm, addressing the camera directly. Folks, this isn't just about policy. It's about heart. I believe in using every tool, oil, gas, renewables, to keep America strong and people working. But above all, we've got to talk to each other, not at each other. You build a country by listening, finding common ground, and working together. Senator, you've got vision, but vision needs roots to grow. Let's all listen more. That's how we'll solve this, with answers, not insults. As the applause swelled, Kennedy and AOC exchanged a brief, genuine handshake, a small gesture, but one that spoke volumes. For a moment, the studio felt less divided, united by the hope that respect and dialogue could still bridge even the deepest divides. Anderson Cooper stepped forward, his voice steady and reflective as he addressed both the studio and the millions watching at home. Thank you, Senator Kennedy and Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, for a spirited and passionate debate. Tonight, we've heard two very different visions for America's energy future. Visions that reflect the hopes, fears, and realities of people across this country. He paused, letting the weight of the evening settle over the room. If there's one lesson from tonight, it's that progress doesn't come from shouting each other down or trading insults. It comes from listening, from grounding bold ideas in reality, and from respecting the people behind the policies. The challenges we face, climate change, job security, economic transition, are too big for any one side to solve alone. Cooper's gaze swept the audience, then returned to the camera. As we move forward, let's remember that the future of America isn't just about energy or economics. It's about finding common ground, valuing every voice, and building a future that works for all. Thank you to our candidates, our audience, and everyone watching at home. Good night. The studio lights dimmed slightly, the applause rising one last time as the debate officially came to a close. As the studio lights faded and the candidates exited the stage, the impact of the night's debate rippled far beyond the walls of CNN. News outlets scrambled to dissect every moment, from Kennedy's sharp sit-down girl to AOC's calm, unwavering comeback. Social media was ablaze, memes, reaction videos, and hashtags like hashtag #sitdowngirl and hashtag Kennedy vs. AOC trended for days, sparking heated discussions in living rooms, classrooms, and workplaces across the country. Pundits debated who had won the night. But for many Americans, the real victory was seeing two leaders forced to confront not just each other, but the real fears and hopes of the people they represent. Clips of the candidates' handshake and closing words went viral, with many viewers expressing a longing for more civility and substance in politics. In the days that followed, polls showed a nation still divided, but also more engaged. Town halls and community forums buzzed with renewed energy as citizens demanded real answers and real respect from their leaders. The debate had not solved America's energy crisis, but it had sparked a broader conversation, one about bridging divides, listening deeply, and building a future that includes everyone. The echo of that night lingered, a reminder that even in conflict, there's a path toward connection.